Support for the Abortion Diary comes from listeners like you. This diary entry was made possible by the generous financial support from Suzy Prabhakaran. This podcast is free, but it takes money to keep it that way. So, if you're a fan of our podcast and want to support us in continuing to share our abortion stories, become our patron on Patreon. No amount is too small. I've been self-funding this podcast for 4 years, but I need your support to keep it going. To learn more and become our patron, visit patreon.com/theabortiondiary or make a one-time donation on PayPal. All donations are tax deductible. Abortion happens every day. Millions of people around the world will have an abortion each year. But the majority of those people will never talk about their abortion experiences. What if millions of people broke their silence and told the truth about their lives and their choices? This is Melissa Madera in Santo Domingo, República Dominicana, and you're listening to the Abortion Diary podcast. These are the stories we share.
The main reason that I wanted to share my story is because I always felt like I wasn't in a situation or a circumstance where I deserved to access an abortion. So I was 21 when I found out that I was pregnant with my partner, who I'd been with for just over a year, who I had absolutely adored. But from the beginning of our relationship, he had always kind of said, well, if you ever got pregnant, you would get an abortion. And I would say I could never do that. Even though I had considered myself pro-choice in terms of, I think anyone deserves that option and women should choose what happens to their body. But I always said, but I could never do it. And so I would say that to my partner, and until I was in that situation, didn't really realize that you don't necessarily know what you would do until you're in that situation. So I realized that I had been late for my period by about a couple weeks, and so went to buy a pregnancy test with my partner. He went out to grab something from a corner store, and I did it while I was alone. Waiting for him to come back, and saw that it was positive like immediately, and just kind of sat on his bed crying, waiting for him to get home, thinking that like I don't really have a choice. Like I do have a choice, but like I'm choosing between making a choice that I feel he would resent me for forever, or like accessing an abortion and getting to continue being in this awesome relationship with this person that I love so much. So I definitely didn't really see any option other than having an abortion in that moment. And so when he got home, I told him that the test was positive, and he said, like, what do you want to do? And kind of for the first time made me realize that like it was my choice, although I still felt like even if I wouldn't have picked abortion, that our relationship would have just gone downhill and ended, and then I would have been tied to him forever because of like a child and all of that stuff. So I told him that I wanted to access an abortion, and I was working full-time in a retail management position, making pretty good money. I have very supportive parents. My dad lived in Montreal as well, and my mom was still in Manitoba, but I knew that if I chose to have a child, that they would have supported me, whether that was financially, whether it was moving in with them, whether it was coming to live with me for a bit. So I didn't necessarily feel like I deserved to access an abortion because I could have raised a happy, healthy, like middle class kind of child. But I didn't want to lose my partner. And so I didn't tell either of my parents because my mom had always said that everyone should have the right to access abortion, but she could never do it. And it wasn't based in like any religious beliefs, although like I did go to church like from a young age until I was a teenager. But abortion wasn't ever anything that was discussed within that like environment. So my only belief was just from what my mom had said and kind of what I had learned about it. And I felt stupid because I had like done training in high school to be able to teach sex ed to like younger kids. Like I totally knew safer sex, like harm reduction and all of that stuff, and yet just chose to not use it because we didn't want to use condoms and because I didn't react well to hormonal methods, and I wasn't educated about other methods other than really like a diaphragm or contraceptive pills. And so I felt stupid and kind of embarrassed. And so I called the Morgentaler Center with my partner the night that I found out and left a message and got a call back the next day. And they let me know that I would have to wait 4 weeks because I told them when my last period was and all of that stuff. So knowing that I had to live with knowing that like something was growing inside me for 4 weeks and everything like really was really uncomfortable. And I in that moment I was like, I can't wait 4 weeks. Like I don't want to do this for 4 weeks. But knowing that there wasn't really any other option. So I made my appointment, and luckily all I needed was my Quebec health card, and that was literally it. Like there was nothing I was gonna have to pay for. I didn't have to go in for a session or an aftercare session or anything like that. So I knew it was just one appointment. And so about a week after, I decided to go out with my friends, and I was trying to cope with like what was going on. And so I drank with all my friends. And then the next day I was like violently ill, and it was like a hangover, or like it felt like there was something like poisonous living inside my body for the next 3 weeks after that. So I basically was ill, nauseous all the time. I would eat and then throw up 5 minutes later, like keeping nothing down. And I think now as I look back, I can relate some of that to anxiety, but in that moment couldn't identify it as that and just thought like this is morning sickness, or this is what it's like. And so it was a really uncomfortable like 3 weeks after that to wait. So when I saw my dad, I'd have to be like, yeah, I'm just really not feeling good, and at work I'm just not feeling good. And so I was able to talk to my boss and get the day off for my appointment, and my partner forgot to book it off, so I went with my roommate at the time. And we went, and even on our way there, like I kept saying to myself, like, you can change your mind. Like, it's okay if you don't end up going through with this. Like even if it's the last minute, like you can still say no. And so I got to the center and filled out the paperwork and was sitting in the waiting room. And then I got called in to talk to like a counselor who just kind of clarified that this was my decision, that no one was pressuring me, that there was no coercion. And I like cried but assured her that yes, this was my decision. And even though I still in the back of my mind was like, this is my decision because I don't want to lose who I'm with. And then I went back to the waiting room, and then I got called in to do an ultrasound. And so I didn't know that they were going to do that part. And I never wanted to know. Like, I didn't Google to see like what it looked like that far along or anything like that. And so knowing she was going to do an ultrasound, I just like looked away and did not want to see the screen at all. And she told me it was like 9 weeks along. And so after the ultrasound, then I like got changed and put on the gown, and I went into the like procedure room, I guess, with the 2 nurses. And so one nurse gave me the narcotic like through an IV or the local anesthesia, and then held my hand the whole time and was just talking to me and distracting me and making me laugh because the narcotic worked and kind of made me giggly. And then the doctor was doing the procedure, the surgical abortion. So the only thing that I felt the whole time was like a tiny pinch when she like went through the cervix, and then just pressure, which was surprising for me. I thought there would be like some pain of some sort, but it really was a painless procedure for me. And then it was done quickly, like 15 minutes, I want to say max. And then I went into the like aftercare room where I had to stay for 2 hours with my friend. And they gave me like a pad to wear because there was going to be bleeding, and then some Tylenol, and just kind of monitored that everything was okay and stuff, because you are like high off the narcotic for a bit, so that takes a while for that to wear off, and then they kind of test your balance and make sure you're okay when you stand up. And then once everything was fine, I left with my roommate, and I was starving, and so we went to Subway, and that was the first meal that I had. Like, it was instantly like I didn't feel ill at all anymore. And so that was the first meal I had where I feel like, okay, I'm back to myself. This is over with. And I think like I went home that night, and my dad surprise visited me at my apartment when I'm in my sweatpants, kind of just not feeling amazing because of the emotional like drainedness that I felt. But yeah, I just was like, it was another lie, my last lie that I thought I had to tell my dad. And once he left, I was like, okay, it's over. I don't have to hide anything anymore. I'm gonna feel fine like tomorrow, hopefully. And yeah, and then I went back to work the next day and just felt alive again. And it was positive when I looked back, and I was like, immediately when I felt better, that's when I knew that like this was the right choice for me. And because I had always imagined pregnancy as being this really magical feeling, and that's why I thought like as much as everyone else can access an abortion and I would never judge them for that, like I just thought that I would have a different relationship to being pregnant. And so for it to be not a positive experience, like really kind of opened my eyes and made me not want kids for like years after that, thinking I'd never want kids. I thought it was going to be amazing. I'd be in love with it, and I wasn't, so I don't need that experience. And I did end up telling my dad 2 years later, and he got really upset because he said, I would have never judged you or told you not to do it, but I would have been there with you. And so that was nice to hear that he wasn't judging my decision afterwards, because I wouldn't have told him anyways, because I feel like as much as he says I wouldn't have judged you, and I don't think he would have, I think he would have felt a relationship to like my pregnancy. And I think that he would have had some grieving to do, and maybe he did do some grieving after I told him, but like I wouldn't want to put him in that position where he knew that I was pregnant and had to deal with that. So I think it was a bit easier for him to find out after the fact. And I told my mom a year after I told my dad, when we were having a heated discussion about abortion and circumstances where it would be acceptable, and going back to me not feeling like I deserved to have one, or I should have. And when I told my mom, she didn't talk to me for 2 weeks, even though it was 3 years later. And like my mom is so supportive and everything, but she was grieving. And when we talked, she told me that she was grieving the loss of her first grandchild. And so for her, again, like had I told her, she would have had that relationship to my pregnancy that I think I was just trying to avoid altogether. And I did tell my brother when I was pregnant that I was going to go and access an abortion, and he was supportive. He's 2 years younger, and yeah, he was just like, you need to do what you need to do, and as long as it's your choice, you know, you're not going to regret it. And so it was nice to have that support. But yeah, telling my family was tricky, and I'm glad they know now because I can be vocal about like my advocacy for abortion and my pro-choiceness and human rights, and yeah, and they can understand that I'm coming at it from maybe a different view than they are, or than they would have thought I was. And so yeah, I just think it's just important that people know that there's just so many different backgrounds, and it doesn't matter if you have all the money in the world and you could support that child, but that like, yeah, it just has to be your choice, and that's the only way that you're not going to regret it in the long run. Doesn't mean you wouldn't like have negative feelings about it or have to process it or anything, but yeah, that's it.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
When you talked about going to the clinic,
Mm-hmm.
you said that your partner couldn't go with you,
Mm-hmm.
but that you went with a friend.
Yeah.
Were you open with your friends or people around you during this time when you were going to access an abortion?
Yeah, so I told my 2 roommates that I was going to access. And that's one of those girls is the one that came with me. And then I had told my boss at the time, who is my best friend now. And so she was really supportive and told me that, you know, she had a friend who had accessed a few abortions, and if I was okay with it, if she could let her friend know, and if I wanted to talk to her, that she could kind of set that up. But I didn't end up talking to that friend. And yeah, so I hadn't told a lot of people. I think when I was drinking that night, I told one other friend, and yeah, and she had said that she would adopt the baby and I shouldn't have an abortion from a religious standpoint. But I was just like, this is what I'm doing. I'm just letting you know because you're my friend and we're in this situation. And I believe I started feeling ill that night anyways. But yeah, I didn't tell a lot of people. Yeah.
Have you shared this experience with other people since then?
Definitely, yeah. So since moving to Ottawa, I started volunteering with Planned Parenthood. So it's been 4 years that I've been volunteering with them. And I don't think I was a feminist before I started volunteering with them. And I wasn't an advocate for reproductive rights or anything like that, or sex education. I was like interested and I found it cool, but I definitely wasn't educated on it. And so when I did my training with them, which was pretty intensive, I realized that like this is something that's really important, and that there are people in my situation and other situations that don't have this information or don't feel like it's okay or don't feel like they're able to access it. And so I started like advocating. And so through social media and like counter protesting at the March for Life and stuff like that was shared with anyone who I had on my Facebook or my Instagram or anything like that. And so when I would talk about the March for Life, I would definitely always post that like as someone who has accessed abortion services, and I very openly tell people I've accessed abortion services except at my work because I am a youth worker. And so if clients are experiencing an unintended pregnancy or have questions about abortion, that's something that I never share my experience because it might influence their decision and then it not be fully their decision, but what they think that I might think they should do, or because I did it, maybe they should do it, when really it needs to be their choice completely. So I offer resources. But yeah, that's about the only environment that I wouldn't share. Yeah. And I actually told last Christmas, I was still with my partner. So we were together for almost 7 years, including like the year and a half before the abortion. And a discussion about unintended pregnancies came up at supper. And his brother made a comment, and I said, well, I have access to an abortion. And his brother's response was like, well, you were like 19 or something anyways. And I was like, no, I was 21, because 19 was before I was dating my partner. And so although he had told me that his family knew, they just assumed that it wasn't with him. Yeah. And so the reaction at supper was intense for a Christmas dinner. Maybe not my best timing, but I get like heated a little bit when it's on the attack, or people are called uneducated because they experience unintended pregnancies. And so I was like, well, no, like my partner and I accessed an abortion, and the whole family was just like, oh. And then his mom gave him the same feedback my mom gave me, that she was grieving, that she had the potential of having a grandchild, and that was taken away. And so it was definitely awkward for the rest of the dinner. But I mean, I had been a part of their family for 6 years, and they knew that I was outspoken and passionate about advocating for those services. And so I don't think they were shocked at what I said, but I think they were shocked that it had been with like a part of their family. Yeah. But we were okay after. Like I saw them multiple times after that, and it was okay. But my partner was upset and had kind of said, like, not the right time when I voiced it at the dinner table. And we talked about it in the car after, because we drove to my mom's for Christmas. And I told him that I felt like he didn't have my back. And I told him that he didn't take the time off to come to the appointment with me. And then he didn't come to the counter protest at the March for Life like he said he was going to come with me. And then I felt like as much as he would get upset that I said I had an abortion, he's like, we had an abortion. And I was like, but I feel like you haven't played a part in it, because you weren't there and you haven't advocated since, and like you didn't stick up for me at dinner, and you didn't speak up and say like, no, we had an abortion. So if I say I had an abortion and you're not saying anything, like, yeah, I'm gonna own that. Yeah.
So have you had conversations with him since then about the abortion?
Yeah, definitely. In terms of like contraceptive methods that I wanted to try, because I couldn't do hormones, and I never want to go through that experience again. Because although like I can reflect back and say, it wasn't that bad because there was no pain and it was free and it was one day, and I know my family would be supportive if it happened again. Like, I don't think anyone wants to have to make that choice. And so we tried to do some planning around that. And then, yeah, like it would come up every once in a while, or, I would get sad, or watching, there's a movie that you've probably seen. I can't remember what it's called, but the girl accesses an abortion after like a one-night stand with this guy, and they end up...
Obvious Child?
Yes, Obvious Child. So I watched that with him. And so that was a really emotional experience. I was bawling my eyes out, because I just felt like he was maybe for the first time seeing some of the like emotions or thoughts that go behind it. And so we had a big discussion after that. And just every once in a while I'd get a wave of emotion. And not in terms of like what if I hadn't accessed an abortion, but just like the experience. Like, it's not a fun thing to do. And so we would talk. And we talked after, and yeah. Mm-hmm.
How did you feel when he couldn't come with you, or kind of chose not to come with you?
Yeah. I think I got more upset about it after the fact. So like a year later being like, I can't believe you didn't book the day off. And so I was upset, but in the moment I was like, it's fine. My roommate will come with me. Like, I'm strong. I got this. Like, I don't need you to come with me, kind of thing. But I was kind of in shock that, like, how could you not remember to ask for this time off? Or how could you not call in sick, but you'll call in sick to, like, play video games or stay in bed? And just, like, not understanding where I was, like, why that wasn't a priority in that moment, I think. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And you shared that with him?
Oh, yeah. Very heatedly. I would bring it up every once in a while, like, because it was a habit of his to not book off the time that we needed for anything, whether it was a family thing or something we wanted to do together, or time we wanted to take off together, stuff like that. And so if I got really upset because I felt like the thing was important, I would bring that up. And I think that part of that is because, as much as now I am so glad that that was the choice that I made because of the life that I have and how happy I am in this moment, I think I always did resent him a little bit because he had always said, no, if you get pregnant, you'll get an abortion. Even though when it actually came to the moment, he was like, what do you want to do? And so I think that I made a choice, like, not to access an abortion necessarily, but to choose him. I feel like I chose him over, like, what maybe I would have chosen. And I'll never know, but, and like I said, I'm happy with my decision, but yeah, so I think I always resented him for that, and so I would bring it up every once in a while, or, like, get really upset about it, and yeah.
Why do you want to share your story?
I want to share my story because I think through the generations, like, if everyone felt like they could have whatever option they want, whether that is parenting, like, I think if somebody wants to parent and that's truly what they want to do, but they feel like pressures from other people or anything, like, if they're able to, like, I think that they need to do that. And if they want to go through with an adoption or anything like that, that they really need to do that. And so I think that abortion, when you access an abortion, there aren't a lot of aftercare, like, services and supports. And so I think that by sharing my story, I'm just hoping that if somebody's had a similar experience, that they can know that, like, anyone deserves to access an abortion if they want to, regardless of their circumstance. And, like, you really, even somebody who's considering abortion, if they listen to it, if they realize that, I really don't want an abortion, then they need to, like, listen to that voice or that feeling and go with what they truly want to do. And I just want people to know that there's supports, and there's so many people out there who have been through similar experiences. And I think that once we're open to talking about it, and once we're comfortable, if it's safe for us to talk about it, that we can be amazing supports for each other. Like, yeah. And so this is a cool way for people to get to hear other people's stories if they want. But we need more aftercare services, post-abortion services. Yeah. So that's why I found this podcast when I was looking for them for Planned Parenthood. Yeah.
What kind of post-abortion or aftercare services would you have liked?
I think a follow-up appointment with a counselor, just to see, like, how emotionally you were processing it, because I do think you grieve the experience or the what ifs. You grieve, like, well, what if I had, like, carried to term, and, like, what if I was a mom now, or, so I think you're grieving some of the, like, potential outcomes that could have happened. And just to make sure that, like you feel supported, or what supports are out there, or you know all the different methods of contraception that are available to you. If that was an issue or if you were having trouble accessing that. And so I think that just like, hey, how are you doing? Because not everyone can share it with it. Some people go in there completely alone. Some people have no supports. And so I was lucky to have a roommate that I could talk to after, but even just asking, like, how can I share this with my family? Or like, some things I might have to process if I'm unable to share it with my family, and talk about that. And just, yeah, I don't know. Just an opportunity to debrief if I needed it. Yeah.
What sorts of feelings or emotions were you experiencing after your abortion?
Relief was the main one. I was like, wow, like, I feel better. I know that there's no commitment coming, for the rest of my life, basically. But I felt sad because pregnancy wasn't what I thought it was going to be. It wasn't that immediate connection. I felt like there was an alien inside of me that I needed to like get out. So I was sad for that. And I think that impacted me for a lot of years because I just was like, no, I don't want children. I don't need that. I had the experience of being pregnant. And people would say to me like, oh, just wait till you're pregnant. And it was so hard sometimes to not be like, well, actually, I've been pregnant and it wasn't amazing. So that might not apply to me. And I think viewing my situation as how any pregnancy that I was going to have would be experienced. And now I've changed like my view on that. But for a very long time, I was like, no, I'm not having kids. And I think that, yeah, that was hard to be sad about how magical I thought pregnancy was going to be no matter what the circumstance. Yeah.
Were you able to process those feelings? Did you have any way to do that for yourself?
Not really. I think when I watched Obvious Child, that was when I really grieved because I didn't really cry about it after. Like, I would get teary sometimes just thinking about like how I felt kind of alone because my partner didn't come with me or because I couldn't have told my parents. And I cried when my mom told me that she was grieving because that kind of hit me. And I was like, you don't get to grieve. Like, you don't get to take this experience that I had and make it about you. Which I did say to her. And so, yeah, I don't think I processed them till much later. Like, I even sat down like months ago and started to write about the experience and just couldn't. I was like remembering all the details and like the ultrasound really hit me. Like, that was a really emotional thing to have to look away and know that if I did look, I would see like the size. Yeah, so that was hard. And then, yeah, so I think I processed all those emotions, but much later. Yeah, and I think that it did impact me throughout those years up until I did process them. Yeah, and then I was able to like be like, this was an experience. It doesn't mean every pregnancy is gonna feel that way. Like, if you do get pregnant, yeah, and it doesn't mean that every guy that you're with is gonna not care or like let you know right off the bat what they think that you're going to do if you do get pregnant. And I know that he was saying that because he just didn't think it was going to happen. So I do know that, like, I didn't feel pressured when he would say that. I knew we were just like, oh, like, it's not going to happen. So no one thinks it's going to happen. But yeah.
So how does it feel now to have shared your story in this way?
It feels kind of scary because my parents know that you're here and that I'm sharing my story. And so I'm assuming eventually they will probably check it out, which is okay because I think that it's important for them to hear that too. But I feel good. I feel like especially with the parent piece and how they feel ownership over over that, I think could be beneficial for some people to know that like they're not alone in that, and that they don't have to feel guilty because somebody is taking their experience and making it about them. And so yeah, and I feel like a little relief. Yeah.
I do have another question.
Yeah.
I just want some information.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about the pro-life march that happens every year here in Ottawa?
Yes.
And what the counter-protest is and what you do?
Yeah. And so the March for Life is a pro-life march that happens in Ottawa every May. And it's thousands and thousands of people. I think this year it said like 20,000 people were attending, if not more. I don't have my phone, but so basically Catholic schools will bus in children. It's like a field trip for the year. And then people come from all over it's the national March for Life that happens. And so there's pro-life speeches given on Parliament Hill. They walk down through downtown, like off Elgin and everything. And so it's blocked because there are some people who are like quite aggressive with their counter protests. But basically 3 years ago, it was supposed to be a silent counter protest, so just signs and just like standing there, because as much as you want to express your anger and frustration and your hurt with all of the like skewed facts that and just like misrepresentation, the photos are not always legit and all that stuff, there are so many children. So to yell like hurtful things back is just like, one, instilling this fear in the children that like pro-choice people are radicals, extremists, or say hurtful things. And you have children that are crying. Like, children are crying in this walk. It's just like a very emotional thing to even watch. And so the counter protest, there's different places that will have sign making leading up, so you can go and be around like supportive people. And then there's Planned Parenthood offers kind of a post-march support. So if anyone feels overly triggered or just wants some help or just wants to be around people that they know share those values, they can go to Planned Parenthood for that after the march. And yeah, so it's a very weird kind of thing to observe, but we'll like chant things, and you know, you have groups of women wearing "I regret my abortion" t-shirts and stuff. And so it's hard to see that when I'm someone who doesn't regret my abortion. And so I'm like, that's okay, and that's your experience, but like people have other experiences too. And yeah, it's just like a huge thing that like I'm always amazed at how many people are there, and the buses you see with the kids in their uniforms getting off, and kids having signs, and people like, you'll have people with rosaries and holy water and Bibles, and I had holy water thrown at me when I was just standing on the side at the counter protest. And yeah, for some reason, like, I get it. The city allows us to do, you know, pro-choice marches and the women's march that just happened and everything. So I get that there can't be a double standard just because it's a viewpoint that I don't agree with. But yeah, it's a very emotional experience. Yeah. Not fun at all. Yeah.
How many people do you think go to the counter protest?
Maybe 100, 200. It's hard because you don't necessarily see everyone because there's barricades. So it's like one of the only marches that I've seen like full barricades on the sidewalk. So if you're not in the march, you're like blocked by a gate thing. So people can be along that gate for the counter protest anywhere along the whole entire walk. So from where I was, like there was about, I want to say 100 people where I was positioned, but there could have been more. Yeah. And I think this year we might see more if we had like 10,000 people at the Women's March, a lot with pro-choice signs and reproductive justice and everything like that. So I think maybe people will be more vocal this year with what's going on in the States. Yeah.
Is there anything else you'd like to share?
I'm thinking of something that popped into my head. My grandma had an unintended pregnancy when she was 16 and gave up twins. And I think that was extremely traumatic for her. And so I learned about that because I was born on the same day as they were born, like April 5th, we share a birthday. And so my whole family found out about it when I was born because my mom said to my grandma, I'm so excited. Jael has her birthday all to herself. And my grandma told my mom then, like, actually, like, I had twins when I was 16 and gave them up for adoption. And both of those women are in my life. And yeah, they were a part of my family when I was quite young is when they found us and we found them. And my grandma just, like, from what my mom has said, because I was young, but my grandma was just kind of like a new person. Like, it was like this weight was lifted off of her. And so even though I wasn't thinking about that when I accessed my abortion, like, I did know that giving, from my family's experience, that giving children up for adoption, like, did have kind of an everlasting impact on someone. And I just couldn't fathom carrying to term and going with that option, basically, because there were people in my family who had done that, who, you know, it impacted them for years and years and years.
For more information about the Abortion Diary podcast, visit us on the web at theabortiondiary.com or email me at melissam@theabortiondiary.com. If you would like to share your story, visit our website, click on Share Your Abortion Story, and send me a message. Or drop me a line at melissam@theabortiondiary.com. We're trying our best to climb the charts on iTunes, so if you're a fan of the podcast, please subscribe to our podcast on iTunes and write us a review. Even if it's not how you listen, you'll help us reach more people. You can also leave a comment on our website or take our listener survey. I love to hear from you. You can also listen to over 160 stories on our website, SoundCloud, Google Play, Stitcher Radio, or your favorite podcast app. If you'd like to support the Abortion Diary, you can make a tax-deductible donation to us on Patreon or PayPal. You can also bring me to your college campus or organization. I use the money generated from that to make more Abortion Diary episodes. And remember to follow us on Twitter at Abortion Diary and like us on Facebook. A special thanks to you for listening. I'm Melissa Madera, and I'll be back next week with a new story.